Remember when a Vegas buffet felt like the greatest deal in America? When you could walk into any casino, hand over a couple of bills, and walk out feeling like you had just eaten at a royal banquet. Families could sit together without hesitation, piling their plates high with roast beef, shrimp cocktail, soft rolls, and desserts stacked like little towers of joy. Those meals were more than food. They were traditions, rituals that made Las Vegas feel warm, welcoming, and alive. A Vegas buffet was the one place where everyone, no matter their job or income, could feel like they belonged. But that world didn't disappear overnight. It was slowly drained away, one price increase, one menu cut, one temporary closure at a time. What used to symbolize generosity has become a casualty of corporate greed. And this is the story of how a beloved Vegas ritual rose, thrived, and became a luxury only the wealthy can afford. Las Vegas didn't invent the buffet out of generosity or glamour. It invented it out of desperation. In the 1940s and 50s, the city was still a dusty gambling outpost in the desert, with neon dreams far bigger than its infrastructure. Shows wrapped up late, restaurants closed early, and gamblers kept wandering out into the night in search of something, anything, to eat. Casinos had a problem. Every time players left to grab food, they weren't just stepping outside, they were walking away from the tables, away from the slots, and away from the money the house depended on. So Vegas came up with a solution so simple, yet so brilliant, that it would shape the city's identity for generations. They rolled out a long table, filled it with cheap cold cuts and hot pans of simple food, slapped a sign on top that basically said all you can eat, and created a silent deal. Eat as much as you want, as long as you stay inside and keep gambling. What started as a profit tactic became an unexpected act of hospitality. For the first time, the everyday visitor, the bus driver, the secretary, the construction worker, the school teacher, could walk into a casino and feel like a high roller for a night. No velvet rope, no dress code, no need to spend big. The buffet didn't judge who you were or how much you made. It fed everyone the same, and people felt that. The Vegas buffet became a symbol of inclusion in a city built on risk. It was warm, cheap, comforting, and welcoming at any hour of the night. The food wasn't fancy, but the feeling was priceless. Families could finally afford to eat together. Gamblers didn't have to choose between hunger and entertainment. Locals found a place that treated them like regulars, even if they weren't big spenders. Long before buffets became spectacles with crab legs and carving stations, they were something more important, the heart of early Vegas hospitality. A promise, unstated but deeply felt, that no matter who you were, Vegas would take care of you. And that promise would shape everything that came next. By the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, something extraordinary happened in Las Vegas. The buffet, born from desperation, evolved into the warmest, most democratic tradition the city had ever offered. Prices were so low they felt impossible. Families lined up around corners, tourists rushed in after shows, and locals treated buffets like weekly rituals. Casinos didn't care about losing money on food because they understood something deeper. A cheap meal wasn't an expense. It was an investment in loyalty. People came back because they felt welcomed, they felt valued. And in a city built on fantasy, the buffet became the one place where the fantasy was completely real. The quality wasn't the magic, the feeling was. Dad piling roast beef on his plate, mom grabbing shrimp cocktail, kids stacking desserts like tiny architects building sugary skyscrapers. Every family, no matter their background, could sit together at one table without worrying about the bill. In a town obsessed with luck, the buffet was the one sure thing. Affordable, reliable, generous. Visitors from across America would say the same line, and you haven't been to Vegas unless you've hit the buffet. It became part of the Vegas identity, as iconic as neon signs or slot machines. And the casinos embraced that reputation. They kept the prices low, the variety high, and the atmosphere warm. Buffets became more than dining rooms. They were community centers disguised as food halls. Birthdays, anniversaries, post-show dinners, Sunday traditions, everything happened here. They bridged the gap between locals and tourists, rich and working class, first-timers and regulars. In those decades, Vegas felt personal. It felt human. A place where a bus driver and a millionaire could stand in the same line, carry the same plate, and enjoy the same meal without a hint of hierarchy. The golden age of buffets wasn't about food. It was about belonging. Vegas wasn't selling luxury yet. It was selling comfort, inclusion, and a feeling that everyone, from every walk of life, deserved a taste of something special. And for a while, that dream worked flawlessly. It built loyalty, memories, and a connection so strong that even today millions still reminisce about those buffets with a kind of nostalgia reserved only for the best days of their lives. By the early 1990s, Las Vegas buffets transformed from humble, inexpensive dining rooms into full-blown spectacles, extravagant food arenas that mirrored the city's rising ambition. Casinos were no longer just competing on slot machines or show headliners. They were competing on buffets. And the question became simple. Who could outdo everyone else? The result was the super buffet era, a culinary arms race that pushed the limits of what all you can eat could possibly mean. Suddenly, buffets weren't just places to grab a quick meal. They became destinations. Tourists planned entire vacation days around visiting the biggest, craziest buffets on the Strip. Casinos invested millions into granite counters, carving theaters, custom grill stations, endless dessert halls, and seafood towers stacked so high they looked like edible skyscrapers, crab legs, prime rib carved to order, dim sum stations, wood-fired pizzas, sushi bars, French pastries, and chef-run cooking lines, all under one roof, all for one fixed price. And here was the magic. For most people, it was still affordable. $20 or $30 unlocked a world of flavors that felt almost impossible anywhere else in America. It wasn't just variety, it was the feeling that Vegas was giving you more than you paid for. In a country where value was disappearing fast, Vegas buffets made you feel like a winner the moment you walked in. Families bragged about which buffets they tried. Travel magazines ranked them like national landmarks. People would fly in from out of state just for a single buffet experience. The super buffet wasn't food, it was identity. It represented Vegas excess in the most charming, approachable way. Indulgence without judgment, luxury without exclusivity. The rich and the working class stood shoulder to shoulder, each building their own personal feast. And for casinos, this was a golden formula. A great buffet drew crowds. Crowds filled hotel rooms, full hotels filled casino floors. It was hospitality and strategy blending perfectly. Looking back, that era feels almost mythical, a time when Vegas understood that generosity could be a business model, and that giving people unforgettable value would pay for itself many times over. This was the peak, the moment when the city embraced extravagance not to extract money, but to create awe. And no one knew it yet, but Vegas would never reach this height again. By the 2000s, the Las Vegas Strip was no longer run by scrappy casino owners or hospitality pioneers. It was controlled by billion-dollar corporations, publicly traded giants who answered not to guests, not to tradition, but to shareholders. And that shift changed everything about the buffet. What had once been the beating heart of Vegas hospitality became a line item on a spreadsheet. An expense to cut, a relic to retire. Executives began asking questions their predecessors never would have dared. Why offer cheap food when people will pay premium prices? Why give away value when the Strip has become a global luxury destination? Why keep a buffet that takes hundreds of employees, millions in overhead, and thousands of square feet when a trendy food hall can charge $18 for a sandwich and $12 for a donut? Piece by piece, the old logic of Vegas collapsed. Menus shrank, lines grew longer, prices crept higher, local buffets quietly disappeared. And just when guests started asking questions, 2020 arrived, and it became the perfect excuse. Almost overnight, dozens of beloved buffets shut their doors temporarily, but everyone inside the industry knew the truth. Corporations had been waiting for this moment. Buffets didn't make direct profits, they made loyalty. They made memories. They made Vegas feel human. And corporate Vegas didn't want human. It wanted margins. So the closures became permanent. In their place came the new strip dining model. Upscale food halls, boutique vendors, artisanal branding, neon-lit counters selling $20 sandwiches, $16 tacos, $25 rice bowls, and $9 bottled water. These places looked modern, but they lacked the soul that buffets once carried effortlessly. For families, the change was devastating. Instead of one affordable meal together, everyone now had to walk to different vendors, calculate different prices, wait in different lines, and hope there was seating left. The experience wasn't communal anymore, it was transactional. For locals, it felt like betrayal. The Vegas that once welcomed everyone was now pricing them out of their own city. And for tourists, the illusion cracked. Vegas hospitality, the old promise that everyone gets treated like a high roller, had been quietly replaced by corporate extraction. What survived wasn't generosity, but monetization. And from this point forward, everything about the buffet would only get worse. By the time buffets reopened after 2020, something had fundamentally changed. The cheap, generous meals that once defined Vegas were gone, and in their place came a price explosion so aggressive it shocked even loyal visitors. The same buffets that once charged $7.99 were suddenly asking $49.99, $59.99, even $79.99 for dinner, and the increases didn't happen slowly. They hit all at once, like a switch had been flipped. At first, people tried to rationalize it. Everything is more expensive these days. It's Vegas. You pay for the experience. It's still cheaper than ordering multiple dishes at a restaurant. But those excuses didn't last. Prices kept rising, long after inflation cooled. And the most uncomfortable truth soon became impossible to ignore. Families were being priced out of the very tradition that once welcomed them. A family of 4 now easily spends $300 to $500 at a buffet, before drinks, before tax, before tip. And what makes it worse is that the quality rarely matches the cost. Many buffets cut seafood nights, carving stations, made-to-order omelets, or premium desserts, while still raising prices. Guests realized they weren't paying for food anymore. They were paying for nostalgia. For the memory of a Vegas that no longer exists. For the idea that buffets were still symbols of abundance rather than corporate revenue machines. In the past, value was the foundation of Vegas hospitality. Now the new logic is simple. Charge as much as the market will tolerate, and if people complain, let them. 1 million new tourists will replace them next week. This shift created an invisible dividing line across the city. Buffets, once the great equalizer, became a luxury. Wealthy visitors could still enjoy them without blinking. Middle-class families could not. Locals, who once treated buffets as weekly rituals, simply stopped going. And for the first time in decades, buffets stopped serving the community that built them. What emerges is a harsher Vegas, a colder Vegas, a city that monetizes memory, bills people for tradition, and turns once accessible moments into premium experiences. The price explosion didn't just make buffets expensive, it pushed them out of reach for the very people who loved them most. When buffets died, Las Vegas didn't just lose a dining option, it lost one of the last places where the city still felt human. For decades, buffets acted as the great social equalizer, where families, tourists, locals, retirees, night shift workers, and weekend gamblers all shared the same room, the same tables, and the same food. It didn't matter who you were or how much you earned, everyone stood in the same line. That simple, universal experience created something rare in a city built on fantasy, genuine connection. Buffets were where vacations began, where locals celebrated birthdays, where grandparents told old stories, where kids discovered new foods, where hungover friends stumbled in at 11 a.m. for redemption on a plate. It was one of the few places in Vegas where money didn't divide people. But when buffets disappeared, that sense of togetherness disappeared with them. Food halls replaced them, but food halls don't create community. They send everyone to different vendors with different prices, different wait times, different menus, and no guarantee of seating together. Instead of laughing over one shared table, families now sit scattered across loud, crowded food courts, holding overpriced trays from 3 different lines, trying to recreate a moment that no longer exists. Locals feel the loss even more intensely. For many, buffets were a weekly ritual, a place where 3 generations could sit together without reservation, without pressure, without worrying whether they could afford the bill. Now, that tradition is gone. The disappearance of buffets didn't just change how Vegas eats, it changed how Vegas feels. The city became colder, more transactional, more corporate. Every corner now feels monetized. Every experience feels engineered for maximum spending. And the warmth that buffets once offered, the unspoken promise that Vegas welcomed everyone, faded into memory. What remains is a void no premium restaurant or neon-lit food hall can fill. Because buffets weren't about crab legs or carving stations, they were about belonging, about accessibility, about moments shared, not purchased. The loss of buffets is the loss of old Vegas itself, a version of the city that believed hospitality mattered more than profit and that everyone, not just the wealthy, deserved a place at the table. And that loss changed the soul of the city forever. Even though the buffet landscape in Las Vegas is almost unrecognizable today, a few survivors remain, small, humble, and often overlooked by tourists racing toward neon-lit food halls. These final buffets don't make headlines. They don't appear in glossy travel ads. They don't trend on TikTok with ring lights and background music. But they represent something the Strip has almost entirely forgotten: the original spirit of Vegas hospitality. These surviving buffets are tucked inside off-strip casinos, neighborhood properties, and locals' first resorts. They're not glamorous, and they're certainly not trying to be. Instead, they serve something more valuable than prime rib or lobster tails. They serve authenticity. They keep their prices reasonable. They feed regulars who return week after week. They treat guests like neighbors instead of transactions. And they preserve the belief that a good meal doesn't need to be exclusive or expensive to matter. Walk into one of these places and you immediately feel the difference. The lines are friendlier. The staff recognize returning faces. The atmosphere feels slower, calmer, more human. You'll find families, retirees, locals on lunch breaks, and longtime Vegas visitors who remember what the city used to feel like. These buffets are not chasing whales, influencers, or high-spending tourists. They're serving the people who built this city, people who still believe Vegas is at its best when it welcomes everyone. In a city obsessed with reinvention, these buffets stand as quiet reminders that tradition doesn't have to disappear just because something newer and shinier takes its place. They show that value, kindness, and community still have a market, even in modern Vegas. But their existence is fragile. Rising costs, shrinking staff, and corporate pressure make their future uncertain. Some may not survive the next decade. And that's exactly why they matter so much now. Supporting them isn't just about grabbing a cheap meal, it's about choosing which version of Vegas you want to keep alive. Every time someone picks a local buffet over an overpriced food hall, they're voting for a city that values people over profit. They're keeping a piece of old Vegas breathing. These last survivors prove something powerful. Vegas doesn't need to be expensive to be magical. It doesn't need to be corporate to be welcoming. And as long as even a few of these buffets remain, the soul of the city still has a fighting chance. The collapse of the Las Vegas buffet isn't just a story about rising prices or corporate greed. It's a window into a much larger identity crisis, one that reveals how the city has quietly shifted from hospitality to extraction, from inclusion to segmentation, and from community building to revenue optimization. Buffets didn't die because people stopped loving them. They died because the economics of modern Vegas no longer support anything that doesn't generate immediate profit. And that shift exposes the deeper transformation happening beneath the neon lights. Today, Vegas operates less like a playground and more like an algorithm. Every square foot of casino space is measured against projected revenue per visitor. Every menu item, every seating area, every employee hour is evaluated through the lens of shareholder returns. Buffets, which historically relied on long-term loyalty and repeat customers, simply don't fit into that model. The city has moved from giving value upfront to charging value upfront. From come in, we'll take care of you, to pay first, participate later. The result is a version of Vegas that feels colder, tighter, and increasingly inaccessible to the middle class, the very group that once kept the Strip alive. The decline of buffets mirrors the broader decline in Vegas's social fabric. Fewer shared experiences, fewer affordable traditions, fewer spaces where different backgrounds mix naturally. A city once built on generosity now runs on microtransactions. And that reveals a hard truth. The real danger isn't that buffets are disappearing. It's that the part of Vegas they represented, warmth, inclusivity, and the belief that everyone deserved a seat at the table, is disappearing with them. Unless something changes, the city may find that losing its buffets is just the first sign of losing its identity. The story of the Las Vegas buffet is more than nostalgia. It's a reminder of what the city once promised and what it risks losing if it keeps chasing short-term profit over long-term trust. And now I want to hear from you. What buffet do you miss the most? Was it part of your family tradition, your first Vegas trip, or a place that made the city feel warm and welcoming? Share your story in the comments, because the more people speak up, the more Vegas listens. And if you found this breakdown useful, subscribe for more deep dives into the real Las Vegas, the one beyond the lights, beyond the marketing, and beyond the corporate gloss.